Well met, everyone. I am Rich the Lich, and today I am doing a review on Attack on Avernus, the Wrath of Tiamat. This is a 78-page PDF that you can download now off of DM's Guild for $7.50. The creator of this is Blaze Wigglesworth, and the co-author is Craig Sutherland. Blaze sent me this review copy, so I did not have to pay for it, but the review that I'm doing and everything I'm talking about today is exactly what you will get should you decide to download this. That being said, I will run this through my review system of layout, design, and editing, art, and most importantly, content. And at the end of it all, after seeing my final score, my review points, comments, critiques, suggestions, hopefully you'll be a bit better informed as to whether or not this might be something that's a good fit for you and your gaming group. Let's jump into it. Up first is layout, design, and editing. Taking a look at the front cover, the title is good. It stands out. The part where it says The Wrath of Tiamat, I would just simply suggest to Blaze, should you create some future content or maybe make another version of this, or other creative individuals out there, be careful with creating some words and using fonts that are a bit too stylish. And it's very interesting, but if you look at the letter T there, where you have the exclamation point afterwards, it can kind of run together and look like a letter H. So just make sure that legibility is paramount. I do like that familiar sort of red ripped flag banner parchment thing down there, because the red immediately draws my eye to it, and within that red it says this is an adventure for levels 17 through 20, so you immediately identify what it is that we're looking at as a product. As we move through, the credits page looks very good. We're starting to see now this parchment, kind of the background and the texture to the piece, but it's contrasting enough with the font choice, so good choice in that regard. Table of contents page looks really good. I like this little interjection of artwork. It looks like it's maybe a photo or something like that, but it starts to scream to us that whole Avernus, hellish, fire, destructive element. Moving on through, the bulk of the font use is very well done. It's a good choice. It's a nice serif font. It just has that aesthetic that is very familiar. It's something that is very readable and legible in large amounts of text blocks, which is what we're going to have here with 78 pages. It's in column format, so that allows us to be able to move our eye efficiently across the page, broken up into those sections. It also has really good use of bold and italicized, staying within the same font family. So that's an important thing when you're picking a certain font family, is be aware that certain fonts don't have too much distinction between regular or light and bold, or regular or light and italicized. And what that often can leave us with is we're not able to put a certain emphasis or focus. For example, we see immediately Avernus, the Wrath of Tiamat, Appendix A, Appendix G, Mantle of Tiamat. Those are important references or things that we want to stand out. And if that font was too close, what's going to happen is it's either not going to stand out or you're going to be forced to use another font. And you want to be careful with that from a production point of view, is don't have too many fonts going on at once. As far as other bits of layout, we've got these little green boxes and blocks that kind of indicate where we can put some special information and so on. I like this a lot, not just the aesthetic of it being tilted a little bit. It just adds a little bit of a playful design aesthetic to it all, but it just looks really cool in the sort of ripped off piece of paper parchment, kind of like someone stuck this on and, hey, I want to offer you a little bit more information that's not just within the bulk of the content in and of itself. The blue boxes are kind of your typical adventure module stuff. Everything in blue indicates reading these things to your players. Again, there's little interjections of artwork, but it's not obtrusive. It doesn't take away from the flow and the layout of the page. This is a really cool font as well. I like it, and it's used in the appropriate spaces. Layout-wise, it's really, really good. There's going to be some hiccups, and I'll talk about that in content in a little bit. And in that regard, that is the reason why, although I just said it all looks really good, it's readable and everything of that nature, I'm going to give layout, design, and editing 1 out of 2 possible points. And when we get into the content, I'll talk about why there was a little bit of that misstep there. Okay, let's take a look up next at art. So we're going to start with the first piece of art we see. Now, the front cover of any document, PDF, or of course, hardcover physical book, right? Because that's the thing that you walk into Barnes & Noble or you walk into your gaming store, and that's what you see on the shelf. It can make or break a piece. It can sell you on a piece. If nothing else, it's a visual aesthetic thing that's going to get you to pick up the book. So the front cover is the first thing you see, and it's your first impression. It's very important to get that right, or at least close to it. Now here, I like the effort and I like the attempt. As far as actual skill and aesthetic ability, there's certainly some bits here that are not nearly to the level that you would see in a WotC book or something like that. If we're looking at Avernus, right? Let's take a look and compare this piece to what we would have seen on the front cover of the Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus book. There's a lot going on here, okay? And the artist, again, A for effort, wonderful job. It's a decent piece. It's not too bad, but there's obviously some issues with anatomy, but there's just a lot of attempts to try and create a really compelling, unique piece, but there's almost too much going on this front cover. We've got that posture and that gesture of the individual turning towards us and pointing, okay? But then, just compositionally, how he is sitting on that beast, that dragon, whatever it is, it's a little bit hard to read. And then we're trying to get the flow of Tiamat and the various colors in the heads and whatnot. But there's a lot of colors going on. And then you've got this kind of environment backdrop where the perspective relative to the characters is a little bit off and things are kind of not running in the appropriate direction. So the best recommendation I can have for something like this moving forward, and this is not just for Blaze, again, in his other creations or other editions he might make of this, but also for other creators out there. If you have something that you can use, I referenced and I said, hey, let's compare this to what WotC used for Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus. Obviously, they have the resources to pull from the greatest concept artists in the gaming industry. We may not have that luxury as normal content creators at home. Either it's going to be prohibitively expensive, or we just don't have the rights to use that type of stuff. If you can't find artists that are able to duplicate something this complex with environment, with characters, with posture, gestures, poses, anatomy, colors, composition, then you can always look towards just simplifying things. I have done some searches in the past of what many fans think are some of the best RPG covers ever. And what I'm going to do really quickly is I'm going to put up a few on screen very quick and just flash them for you to see that these are ones that are highly respected and highly regarded as among some of the best. And you'll notice there's almost a minimal take on them. So you do not need to have this level of skill and expertise to create a really good cover. Because if you don't, it can come off as sort of almost a little basic. And when I'm reading it and I'm looking at that front cover, it kind of feels like, okay, am I getting some sort of homebrew simple stuff, or am I getting some really high-level professional quality stuff? So as you look through these front covers very quickly, I'll flash them right now. Just notice how you can convey quite a bit without having to have the artistic chops to really create something to this level. So the front cover is decent. Again, A for effort. I like it, but I think it could have been better, or perhaps another choice if you're not able to create it with the high level of professionalism that you maybe would see having someone else draw this. Now, the artwork throughout the book, I like the little moments, or the little bits, I should say, where you've got some of them look kind of photo-ish, but that's okay. I feel like they fill the aesthetic and they fit that vibe of what we're going for. And there's little bits here. Something like this, I think, might have even been a little better on the cover with some really good solid use of font and color choice there. It really could have stood out as a front cover that looks like it's something I want to grab off the shelf and delve into a little more. Okay? So the little bits of art, that hourglass is outstanding. It's really, really well done. There's a lot of monster kind of adventure encounter content here. Now, you're not going to see a lot of artwork at that simply because it always points us in the direction of other books. So like in this case, when we're looking at nightmares and barb devils and whatnot, we're looking and referring to the monster manual. So naturally, you're going to look at the artwork that's within the monster manual. Okay. But overall, I'm going to give art a total of 2 out of 3 points. There's a lot of little bits here. There's some pretty cool pieces. The other thing I have to count towards the art is the maps. And the maps leave a little bit to be desired simply because they're very basic. They're very simple. They're almost geometric in nature. But because the cartographer, or if it's Blaze that drew the maps, did not have the, again, the WotC level of cartography skill, it's hard to convey the visuals and the dimensions when you don't have the skill to create that. But if they're going to be very basic and sort of top-down geometric like this, I think you could have maybe added some legends and some labels. That way I kind of know what I'm looking at, since you're not able to convey that aesthetically. So there's a little bit of a slight there. So overall, though, there's some decent pieces, and there's just a lot of really good effort put forth. So I am going to give this 2 out of 3, but again, missing that point because the front cover art could have certainly been better, or perhaps a different choice, and the maps need some kind of labels. Let's move on into the good stuff, the content. First off, what are we looking at here? As it says on the front, we are looking at an adventure for levels 17 through 20. As we move through, it does a really good job of saying and kind of giving this sort of clever wording of saying, if you're looking for cerebral courtly intrigue, if you're looking for a witty reimagining of established norms of dungeon delving, if you're in search for investigative, political stuff, whatever, it's not here. If you're looking for hellish landscape, push your high-level characters to their limits, combat fights, this is what you're getting. So this is a very aggressive, of the 3 pillars of D&D, social exploration and combat, this is combat tenfold, okay? What it does offer us also is there are multiple modes of play for this adventure. You'll find a tier 4 adventure usable in any campaign within. If your players are coming off of the official Tyranny of Dragons adventure, this is sort of a jumping off point that you can now use those characters further and take them into more content, and it also prevents you with a little bit of an adventure hook of how that ties in. It does the same thing if you want to use this as a sequel to Descent into Avernus. Also, if you want to use this as just sort of a one-shot adventure, kind of one long session, there are a slew of 20th level pre-generated characters in the back appendix, in the back of this document, that you can simply use, print out, bring them to the table, assign them to different players, and just run this thing as is. Another thing is, if you want to use something what's called the optional rules, which is Infernal Mode. I think of this as kind of Diablo 3 Hell Mode, right? Where just, over the top, super combo fatality. High-level adventure on steroids, right? If you want to use that mode, this is there as well. So there's a lot of different variants and ways in which you can run this. There is a wealth of content here, almost too much, okay? And I'll talk about why the points were deducted off of both art and layout and design because of how it relates to the content, okay? So what are we essentially getting here? So if you kind of fly above Baldur's Gate, you kind of go into this planar travel, this portal, this other world. I did say Baldur's Gate, that's just because I feel like a lot of this is sort of inspired by and informed by the recent things that have happened in Avernus. But that's not to say this ties into the Forgotten Realms world. I think this can be used anywhere. You're going into the plane of hell anyway. You teleport into that, and you go into this place that's kind of known as the Ebon Corridor, okay? The Ebon Corridor is sort of another... The way I like to think of it is almost very Alien-esque. We're in the pipe, 5 by 5, right? You go into this otherworldly place that has its own different effects, and as it says here, there's various traits about it, how gravity works, how time works, the various hazards that are within, so on and so forth. And as you navigate through this, you're flying, okay? So you are given flying mounts. And it's not just suggesting that or saying, hey, you have flying mounts. No, when you start going through the book, kind of in the back, when you start getting into the appendices, you will see the Majestic Mounts. These are the mounts you get. And it not only gives them to you and kind of talks about them, it gives you names of them. It gives you a little bit of lore and backstory because you're these are your companions as you're flying through this hellish place. It gives you different stats on them. If you're running what's called the Capstone Adventure, which is that one where I said it's that single long one-shot level 20 adventure, it gives you a different version, the legendary version of the mount, so on and so forth. So as you're flying through this sort of hellish place, you get through the Ebon Corridor, and eventually you make your way into what's known as the Adamant Hourglass. This is where the bulk of the content in this document takes place. You'll notice there's a cool little map here that kind of shows, and you kind of arrive at the top, and think of this whole thing, all of this document, this entire high-level last-tier adventure, as a bunch of different rooms or levels that would take place within a video game. So you start at the top, and then you encounter various obstacles, whether it's creatures and encounters, or maybe it's environmental hazards, and very almost TPK-ish level things. This one here, for example, this cavern, there's Meteor Swarm, the spell. That's what, 8th level, 9th level, whatever it is. The Meteor Swarm spell goes off on a certain initiative count every round. That's the... You don't need any other. That's the only threat there. But it has that kind of vibe, and you basically overcome these obstacles, and then you navigate your way down on your flying mounts by pulling a lever, opening up a doorway, and going down to the next level. And then you go down to the next level. And it keeps flowing like that. And each sort of section of pages basically covers all of the details of what's going on in this level. What's going on in this level or this floor, what's going on in this floor, and so on. So that's the sort of content that you have, okay? And it gives you everything. So the first floor, which is this kind of thing up here, the Forceful Guardians, you'll see that there's a little sort of top-down map. It gives you your scale. It shows you, remember in the beginning I talked about there's a bunch of different variants of how this content is presented to you. If you're just running the sort of default, depending on how many adventures you have, here's the encounters that are in this room. It talks about the tactics that those creatures might use, okay? And it points you right into the appropriate book of where to find those monsters. Now, if you're running the level 20 variant, the level 20 version, well, you want to look at the capstone, which the encounters are, as you would expect, a little bit tougher, maybe a little more, a little different. If you're running the Infernal Mode, kind of that variant, you have some more information as to how the encounter may change or be modified depending on which variant you're running. So it's really cool that, yes, you're looking at the first floor and the Forceful Guardians encounter level, but you're getting so many different variants that the replayability is quite high here. It shows you if there's anything that, what are the loots that you can get from this room. Development basically speaks to how do I get past this room and open the door to go to the next part, which would be the next layer, okay? And that's what development is, where it shows you that. Now, where I talked about the maps leave a little bit something to be desired, when it's talking about all these things, it says there is a 10-foot by 10-foot entryway to the next floor, and it's the only apparent mode of ingress. Adventurers that explore this floor will determine that it is made of adamantium, blah, 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 right? Adventurers wishing to locate the source of the River Styx water will find a 6-inch square portal to the River Styx leading to a location of your choice in Avernus. I can kind of piece together on the map where that is, but it would have been nice if you kind of put a legend and indicating where that is, okay? For example, on some subsequent floors, let's say this one here, the L stands for lever. You pull that lever and it opens up this one. That is where you come into the 3rd floor from the 2nd floor. I piece that through together, but because there's so much content and variability where it shows me the capstone, it shows me the Infernal Mode all on the same page, it would have been nice to sort of easily identify that stuff by saying with a little line and a label that says that's the entrance, that's the exit, that's the lever. Just so I can quickly identify what's going on, because there's complexity here. And I think that's why I take the content, as good as it is and how much there is. That's why I think if we look at its relationship between layout design and editing and art, and why I knocked off a point on each of those, is simply because there's so much here. There's a level of complexity that you would expect when you're dealing with a level 17 through 20 adventure. You're looking at complex characters, right? You're looking at complexity in options. What a level 20 character can do and what their character sheet looks like is drastically different than what a level 1 can do. There's just a lot of moving parts, a lot more. But what happened is the content also has a bunch of moving parts. There's threats, like I said, meteor swarm that keeps hitting down. There's numerous devils all over the place that are standing in fire and lava. And the assumption is your PCs have the ability and the capability through magic, through cleverness, through use of their abilities and tricks and things like this, that they can overcome these things, but there's sort of lots of little interjections of different moving parts. Here's the encounters you use. Here's what the map looks like. You know, we look at some others and it tells you that, okay, here's some tactics that the Horned Devils might use, so make sure you get to the Horned Devils and find those in these books. Here's the environment, and here's something that the environment provides. Here's some natural hazards as a result of the environment. Here's development of how do you interact with the door here to go down to the 5th level. All of this is happening all at once, right? There's a lot of moving parts. And if there were some labels on the maps, if there was maybe a little bit better use of color, or perhaps put the capstone stuff, the level 20 adventure, as sort of the variant at the back of the book. And then maybe put the Infernal Mode at another section at the back of the book. That way, the first parts I read through, the first 30 pages, are here's this entire adventure, floors 1 through 8 or whatever there is, in normal mode. And then the middle of the book is, you know, pages 31 through 50 or 60. The adventure might look like if you're playing the capstone variant. Here's what the adventure in the back of the book might look like if you're playing Infernal Mode variant. Just maybe a few little breakups and parts and ways of delineating sort of one variation from the next. That way it's not so overwhelming, because there was just a wealth of content, almost too much. But what I had to often do is I had to say, okay, I read this for the 5th floor. This is for the DM to know. Cool. This is what I'm going to read to my players. Okay, we're playing normal mode. Here's where the monsters are and what book I need to refer to. Okay, now let's look at the map. Okay, I'm guessing that's the way out. What is this? And then I need to go through and kind of read through this section and maybe read through this environment. Okay, there's snowfall here, which is lightly obscuring everything. Good. Okay, I know now, I've established that that's the entrance, exit, so on and so forth. And there's a little bit of back and forth. It's a little bit tough to wrangle in without having sort of a flow chart and an efficiency in aesthetics and things like that. So that's why I knocked the points, because there's so much content, a wealth of it, but the layout design and editing and the art could have maybe helped me indicate visually a little more of where to go. So I think if there was any sort of slight on this whole thing, that would be it. But as I said, if you take any one of these floors, take that same treatment. The 3rd floor has all of this going on. The 4th floor has all of this going on. The 5th floor, the 6th floor. Notice that one floor here, the Dragon Breath floor. Look at how much is here. There's all this other stuff, and there's just so much going on in each section. So each one feels like its own little mini video game level. And it keeps it fun, and it keeps it in that vibe and flow, which, as I said, it's very combat-centric. So the back is all appendices that give you, if there's magic items reference, if there's any monsters that are not referred to in another book. Like I said, there's the pre-gen level 20 characters are there. The mounts that you fly with are all there. There's a great deal here. So for content, I have to give this 4 out of 5 possible points. I'm simply knocking 1 point only for the simple fact that how it's presented to me, I got to kind of wrangle it in and kind of navigate my way through it just a little bit. But all in all, this is my final score. And that, folks, is all I have for you. Thanks everyone for watching, and take care.